Welcome to all of you to this first session of this initiative, the Kipling Balance. Thank you very much, José María. It's an honor to have you as the first guest of this project that is an initiative that we are really very excited about it, and we think that, this poem, if the poem in which the initiative is based it was written more than 1 century ago, and it is incredibly modern today. And I'm sure that from now in 100 years, it will continue being incredibly modern, because it's about human nature and about things that you need in life. You know that the idea, as we transmitted to you, is for each guest to select 1 or 2 verses of the poem, which is extremely difficult, by the way, because you would select all the sentences. No, it's very difficult to say this or that one, but this was the idea, and to start the conversation about what each guest has selected. But before that, José María, the first time I told you about this project, about this initiative, from the very first moment, you told me that for sure you were going to be a guest, because you have a very significant emotional attachment to the poem. Why don't you share with all of us this emotional attachment?
Well, first, thank you very much, Diego, Pablo. It's such an honor to be here. And it's a very special honor to share the stage with you, Pablo. You know a great deal of admiration that I have for you and for this house, for this university. So it's really an honor. The fact is that for me, it reminds me of my father. My father passed away 3 years ago, and since I was very, very young, my father was referring himself to this poem. I mean, for his generation, this poem was kind of cornerstone of their mission in life. I mean, how they wanted to live their lives. For my father specifically, I was Rudyard Kipling, he was Rabindranath Tagore. So I was listening or hearing to part of this poem since I was very, very, very small. So I learned some of these paragraphs by heart in Spanish, but it's always reminded me of my father.
Wow. And in fact, the poem, no, because it's like written by a father to his son, no? Because it finishes, "You will be a man, my son." Well, José María, and well, first of all, I would say that the admiration is mutual, no? But we know each other. We are very good friends since more than 20 years ago. So this is also something for you to know. You have chosen 2 verses. The first one is, "If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on." What does this mean to you, José María? Why?
One of the messages that my father used to say about this part of the poem was that, you know, in life, there are things that depend on you and things that do not depend on you. I mean, you might be smarter, hard worker, but at the end of the day, there is one thing that depends on you, is to have the sense that you have give it all, that there is nothing else you can put on top of the table, that you don't have the impression that you have not tried your best, that you have not give your best. So to be persistent, to make sure that if you believe in something, you have put on top of the table everything you've got to achieve that goal. For me, it's what it means. And you know, you always have the impression that you are doing your best, but you learn that there is, most of the times, there is something else you can do. There is something else you can put on top of the table. It helped me when I'm a runner. I mean,
yes.
So in a marathon, there is always a point in which your mind is telling you to stop, but your body can go a little bit more.
And usually, that moment, where is it? In the kilometer 30? Or?
Yeah, it's called the wall. I mean, sometimes you hit the wall, others you don't. But it's where your body is starting to experience limits. I mean, and then your mind is telling you should be stopping. But if you are able to go above the wall, if you can able to go through the wall, then you realize that you can get to the end. I mean,
and this idea about holding on, about resilience, it's also extremely relevant in management, in companies. Have you faced any experience like this in your professional life that you would like to share with us?
Oh, yes. I mean, we always have. I mean, I don't know. I mean, situations that you are just not prepared for and that are mentally very challenging. For me, the most recent one was the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, for everybody, I would say, and for me too. Whenever people ask me what was the most difficult moment you have ever faced during your professional life, with a huge difference, it was the pandemic, the COVID. Because at the same time, you were concerned about the company, you were concerned about the country, you were concerned about your parents. In my case, you were concerned about the world. So those were very, very challenging moments.
In our case as well, you know, our company, our sector was crucial because, I mean, if the telecom network wouldn't have worked the way they did, would not have performed the way they did, we have become part of the problem itself. But in fact, that the network was never designed to have 100% of the population working from home, being educated from home, having entertainment from home. So 100% of the population at the edge of the network, we never planned our network for that. I never dared before the pandemic, before the confinement, to send 100,000 people to work from home, even though we have tools for that. So from a Friday to a Monday, you are forced to run an experiment that you have not been testing, not even close to that before. And you didn't know how long this was going to take. So for us, mentally, it was very intense every day to check that the network was in good shape, that we were not becoming part of the problem, that we need to digitize new hospitals. So it was stressing, and you know, some nights were very long nights. So at that moment is when you realize that you can give a little bit more.
Yeah, and also during those weeks, particularly the first weeks that were extremely difficult and challenging, what for me was really amazing, and I'm sure in your experience it was the same, is the level of commitment of everybody in the company. So there was a moment in which you were seeing things that probably in other circumstances you would have never expected, about the commitment of everybody with the company and everybody trying to do their best.
It's in moments like this, unfortunately, when you can see things that are intangibles like the kind of commitment, as you were saying, but also I call it more culture. I mean, there is a culture of doing things. There is a culture of service, at least in my company, in your company. So it's not just a job. It's that you have a mission to do, and that we cannot afford to fail in this specific moment in time, because companies at the end have a purpose. I mean, have a purpose, and for us the purpose is to make sure that people is connected when they need to be connected. So, and this is uncharted territory. There was not a handbook that you can give for everybody on that Monday. How you are going to do things? I mean, you learn, and you learn by doing, and the way they reacted, the way the team reacted, the way the team decided to go to the street. I mean, the way we were allowed, because it was, I mean, there was a restriction of movements, and so the culture of servicing, I mean, your customers, to make sure that you have a mission in society, the purpose of your company, the soul of your company was really tested at that time. Yeah. And I was very proud. I need to say I'm really proud of the team.
Yeah, and you should be, because it was unbelievable how everybody reacted. And then you have chosen another verse, José María, which is very different from the previous one, and it's also very, very meaningful. You have chosen the one which says, if you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch. So this one is also very strong message to talk with crowds and keep your virtue, to remain, to lead with values. How relevant are here? Rudyard Kipling is talking about virtue, but the idea is values that need to be behind everything, and then walking with kings, nor lose the common touch. So to remain humble, not to become arrogant, not to think that you are like a king. No, how relevant is this also for companies? You know that I like very much cinema, and when we talk about these ideas of arrogance or being humble, how relevant it is for a company to be humble. When James Cameron was the director of the movie The Titanic, and then in an interview he was asked about what made the Titanic sink, and he answered that it was not an iceberg, it was arrogance, because they were thinking that it was impossible, it was indestructible. And this arrogance, whenever you have in a company, well, there are many things that could destroy a company, but arrogance for sure. And another one, sometimes I also say that success is very good, but very dangerous at the same time, because success brings to complacency. So in a company, the moment you start being arrogant or the moment you start being complacent, you are very, very much in the wrong direction and damaging a lot the company. But why have you selected this verse, and what are your thoughts about these things?
The two verses are close to each other in the poem. So for me, it was again a reminder of my father, and it's because we should not forget who we are. I mean, it's that, you know, I mean, life is sometimes gets you up, sometimes gets you down, and when you're up, you tend to believe that you deserve it, and when you're down, you tend to feel very miserable. So finding that balance, I mean, to be humble enough when you're up to recognize and to remember from where you were coming, and also when you're down, you know, holding the strength to hold on and to carry on. It's for me kind of, that's why I chosen those two together. For me, it's about being humble, but also remember who you are and where you're coming from. I mean, I'm very lucky because, you know, the days at work that you feel an amazing day, I'm a fantastic leader, and then you get home, and my wife, I mean, takes me down to earth. I mean, and that helps me. And then the other way around, when I'm deep down. So for me, having your shelters, places where you can realize and remember who you are, where you're coming from, and having the right dose of, you know, being proud of what you have done right, and, you know, be humble enough to recognize what you have not done so good.
It's like as in the Roman Empire, no? Remember that you are mortal, no?
Yeah, in this case, we are more than mortals. I mean, but yeah, I mean, for me, both things are linked. I mean, you need to be resilient, you need to be humble, but you need to remember who you are and where you are coming from, and what are your values, what are the things that you want to be, you know. Again, linking to the previous comment about the pandemic, there is, most of the time, you navigate through uncharted territory, uncharted seas, and there is no map, there is no handbook. I mean, so values are
and leading with values, that's something so relevant. We can talk about many of these values. One is in the poem, Rudyard Kipling is talking about virtue in general, but this idea of sincerity, integrity, reliability, leading with values from the top is so important in any organization. It's something that transmits all across the company, and when people see a lack of values, then it's the end for a company.
I mean, we all, in our life, we all tend to remember moments. I mean, you don't remember everything, you remember moments, and most of those moments are linked to values. I mean, the way some teacher made you feel, some teacher, you know, was able to teach you, and the way some people made you feel, those are the moments that you tend to remember. In my professional career, I remember every single people that has opened a door for me, I mean, a possibility. I mean, that were kind enough not just to have a job, but also to offer me possibilities. I mean, opening doors for others. when they were not forced to do that. I mean, so I remember all of them. I mean, and it's not because they were smart. They were all very smart, but they had something on top of that, and you tend to remember that. So for me, it's we are humans. I mean, we are human people, and we tend to remember values.
And talking about leadership, José María, what do you think could be the most relevant things to run a team, an organization? How should be a leader? What do you think are the qualities that are more relevant? I know it's a very broad question, but perhaps we can exchange some views about this.
Well, the problem with being or becoming at some point a leader in one organization is that there is nobody else to call. I mean, I always had somebody else to call. I mean, when I have a problem, I can elevate part of the problem, I can share, but at some point, you realize that you are the last phone. I mean, and therefore the whole organization in some moments turns towards you. I mean, to see how you react. I mean, so it's being aware that that's the case, being aware that there are some things that you can just not delegate responsibility. You have that responsibility, you need to face it.
But this is, later you continue, but this that you are mentioning is something very, very relevant for me, that in any type of organization, and of course in companies, people expect the leader, and it can be the CEO of the company, but at a different level, it can be the leader of a team, or it can be to take decisions. So when you have a leadership position, something that you need to do is to take decisions.
You cannot hide away from that. I mean, at some point you need to face it. For me, and it's tough because at some point you are overwhelmed by the situation, and you don't feel you have all the answers, and you take responsibility seriously, so you don't want to improvise. So it's a mixed weight between listening to as many people as possible to form your own idea of the situation, and then you need to decide. I mean, because it's about deciding at some point, and you might be wrong, but you need to decide. So for me, it's that was the leadership is the weight of taking the responsibility of deciding in specific moments in time, because that's what you should be doing.
And then we were talking before, so you were mentioning culture inside companies, how relevant this is, the type of culture that you, and this is something in which the leader of the company or the leadership team of the company play a very, very relevant role in defining the culture of the company. I remember a few months ago, I was having a conversation with the CEO of an American company, and he was saying to me, well, I have permanently the feeling that we take decisions, but that we are never really executing them. And then, well, what I was saying to him, giving him my opinion, was very general comments, no? Because you cannot try to solve the problem of a company in 5 minutes, no? But I was saying to him, because he was saying to me, perhaps I am not putting enough pressure. Well, I was saying to him, of course, as CEO, you always need to put pressure. This is part of your job. But if there is a problem only with pressure, you are not going to solve it. So I was saying to him, well, first, there could be a possibility that perhaps the CEO is not the right person, but let us forget about this possibility. Second, you could have a management team which is not the right people, and then perhaps you need to think about changing the management team. Or second, third, you could have a structure, an organization in which it is not clearly defined who is taking the decisions. Sometimes in many companies, there are many areas which are not defined who is really the owner of this decision. Or lastly, there could be also an issue with the culture of the company. Because if you generate a culture in which people don't want to take risks because they are penalized if they take risks, then nobody wants to decide. And so this idea of what is the culture of the company, if you give people freedom and you allow people to make mistakes, then you have one type of culture. If people are afraid, because if somebody makes a mistake, then this person is punished in the company. So I think all these elements are also extremely relevant.
Absolutely. And on top of that, companies like Telefónica, I mean, next year we'll be celebrating our 100 years, first 100 years of history. There is a culture. There is a way of doing things in Telefónica, and this culture has allowed us to navigate through very different times in our history. So there is a culture in Telefónica, and the culture of Telefónica is amazing in terms of the things that we are able to do if we understand the mission. So for me, the culture is, I mean, there is nothing you can do, even if you have a very strong top-down decision that you want to impose, unless the team understands, unless the team understand where you are trying to take the company to. There is it's very likely that you will fail. So this kind of team thing, spirit, is not just something on the books. I mean, for us, even if you are convinced of one direction of the company, you need to be able to explain that. You need to be able to explain why do you think this is good for the company, and you need to be able to explain that to the team, to your executive committee. I mean, and you can debate that, and you can have different, but at some point you need to be aligned. We go into this direction, and then it needs to go all the way to the whole team, because if not, this is not going to happen. You need to understand that in companies like us, like Telefónica, the immunology system is defined to kill innovation, because we have been successful 100 years, so why should we change? But there are moments in time in which you need to change, and therefore you need to change the immunology predetermined system of the company. And we are in one of these moments in times. And so for me, it's deciding is important, but in order to, in a company like us, to be able to execute, is to make sure that people understand where you are trying to get the company towards.
Yeah, and this that you are mentioning about change, I think you always need to change. There are moments in which probably you need to change in a more intense way. But when you are running a company, somebody gave me this advice many years ago. A person that I admire very much was saying to me, Pablo, whenever you enter into any area of the company, even if you think that it's perfect, change something. I think change, of course, you cannot change without a reason, or you cannot change, but this idea that however good are things, they can always be better, and that the company is a living entity. So if you stay without any type of change, this is a bad decision itself. There always needs to be some type of change inside companies. Of course, you need to know where you go, as you were saying, and you need to have a strategy, and you need to define this strategy. But it is much better if you are with this permanent change mentality than if you need suddenly to make a huge change. And I always say, always trying as much as possible to be one step ahead of the reality. Only one, because if you are too many, then it's also very, very bad for companies. But to try to be a little bit ahead of reality.
I think that, again, getting back to our own history, you don't survive 100 years in our sector if you are not permanently adapting. I mean, so in terms of being open-minded, that's necessary. I mean, we started 100 years ago to sell minutes of voice through a copper line, and that has become obsolete over time. So in our sector, technology cycles are becoming shorter and shorter, and that means that the openness of the mentality of the company needs to be refreshed more and more often. But that means that you need to have different kind of profiles in the company. The ones that understand technology and are open-minded, and the ones that need to take this technology down to earth, literally down to earth, because we are in every corner of the territory. So for us, it needs to be a combination of both things, because unless we are able to match those two profiles, our company will not advance, it will be stagnant, and unless we open our minds, we will not be incorporating the last technology, and we will become obsolete. Absolutely right. And what helps in our case is a balance of profiles. I mean, people that are,
And you are mentioning, José María, something that I wanted also to touch during our conversation. You are talking about technology. Let us talk a little bit about AI, artificial intelligence, data. I've heard you before talking about a new social contract, thinking about data. It's like something similar to the Industrial Revolution, but now we have, AI we have had for many years, but now it looks like there's also a significant step forward in this sense. How are you seeing all these elements and what impact on companies, on our lives?
It's we can spend a whole week on this subject. The first thing is that we see is not the future; it's already here. That's the first message that I would like to convey. And we see it's already here because today more than 40% of the traffic that flows through a telecom network worldwide, more than 40%, is not human traffic anymore. Those are machines talking to each other. And that started 7-8 years ago and is growing double digit. And this is the world of artificial intelligence, which is not just one single technology, it's an accumulation of different technologies, voice recognition, image recognition, deep learning algorithms, artificial intelligence itself, generative AI, blockchain. So there is a 5G standalone, network slicing, edge computing. So there is a lot, neural networks. So there is a lot of technologies that are happening simultaneously in time. And we need to acknowledge one thing, and is that we are very lucky as a human generation because there is no other previous generation in human history that has been living an accumulation of technology the size that we are living right now. What we are living in perspective is 4 times the size of the Industrial Revolution in terms of impact on the GDP per capita of countries. So it's already happening. And every single time there has been an accumulation of technology of this kind, it has changed everything. It has changed the way we live, it has changed the way we behave, it has changed politics, it has changed culture, it has changed economy, and most of the times with a revolution. I mean, so this accumulation of technology is already here and it's not going to stop. All those technologies are retrofitting each other, and therefore this is just starting. The impact it's having on society is already massive. AI is going to destroy millions of jobs, it's going to create millions of jobs, but we need to handle this transition in a responsible way because we should not be leaving anyone behind unless we will have a social revolution. So my message here is that this is not the time for technology. Technology is already here. We have as much technology as we wish. For me, it's the time of social sciences. It's the time of sociology, anthropology, philosophy, law. I mean, it's the time of politics with capital P. So how do we want this thing to happen? Because I think this accumulation of technology is going to solve problems that don't have a solution today, scientific problems or social problems. But we cannot let technology run by itself. I mean, we need to have some social limits of what do we think. How do we think this should be happening?
And do you think that as societies, as countries, or as the European Union, we are doing enough in this sense?
It always happened in all previous technological revolutions that technology goes faster than the social framework of it. I mean, so we are catching up. But we are starting to realize that most of the things that are happening to us are not just another wave of technology, something deeper. I think that we are starting to realize that our privacy is being showcased, is being commercialized. We are starting to realize that the influence of bots on political campaigns is starting to be somehow concerning. We are starting to realize that AI is not perfect, so we should not delegate in AI everything. I mean, it should be a framework of what's the human intervention on AI. It's the first time in human history that we are building something that is able to think by itself. It's the first time, and even to act accordingly. So my message here is that it's time to accelerate the part of the social framework of it, and I honestly think it only can come from Europe. Europe is the homeland of values. I mean, and I don't think this is the time of technology. Technology is already here. I think it's the time of what are the kind of society that we want this technology to serve. I mean, so the technology in itself has no values. It's just technology. And we should...
What type of society do we want to build, and what steps do we need Yeah, but as you were saying, this is something that we could spend 1 week talking only about all the challenges that this technological revolution is bringing, no? Which at the same time is unbelievable for humanity. So it is not a negative vision of this, but it is something that we need to address in one way or another.
I think it's going to be positive. I think that, but I think that we need to be aware that there are moments in times in which something different happens, and we are in one of these moments. And for me, it's like, it's like the time of the Industrial Revolution. Till the Industrial Revolution, probably we just have one production factor, which was capital. The Industrial Revolution created the labor as a microeconomic production factor, and salary became a reference of my labor capabilities. We are creating a new production factor, in my opinion, which is data. And data is part of my dignity. It cannot be expropriated without a compensation. So we are mining data every day. We are mining data every day for somebody else. And data is part of my dignity. It cannot be expropriated without a fair compensation. So I think data is a new production factor. Data is part of my dignity. Data is part of my sovereignty and of the collective sovereignty of nations. So I think that we need to start by very simple facts. And for me, the first fact is that nobody can force me to work for free. Nobody should be able to force me to mine data for free.
Well, this is very strong. You say it as something very natural, but it's a very strong statement. And,
yeah, I can be stronger, but my team doesn't allow me to. But I think that we are, technology is going faster than human rights, and I think that data is part of a human right.
And it's very relevant to have this voice raising attention to this factor. And José María, moving to a completely different angle and talking more about more personal things, I would like to talk a little bit about two things. And the first one is healthy habits, how relevant these are to be a CEO, and what does it mean, for example, for you to have healthy habits, no? And how relevant it is. And the second one is to talk a little bit about books, reading. I know that you are a very consistent reader, let us say it this way, about many different types of books. But let us start with how relevant is, in order to be as successful, let us say it this way, CEO, and with this big level of responsibility and tension, to have healthy habits in your life?
Well, first, for me, it's more about shelters. I mean, there are places in which I need to be in good shape, in good mood, and to have relaxing time, to relax, to take a little bit of perspective. So my first shelter is my family. I'm very lucky. I have an amazing person, my wife, and
this is something that we both have, no? This shelter.
Yeah, this shelter is. I mean, and it's very important because
very important.
It's very important because most of the time you are overwhelmed by responsibility or by by day-to-day problems, and having some place where you can be yourself, where you can really for a while be in another dimension, so to say. It's important, and that helps me a lot. It's the most healthy habit that I have. But then also I always like sports, and again it's my father that. So, but when I was running Latin America, I couldn't play football anymore because you need at least another 10 mates and a team in front of you. Playing tennis is also, but I couldn't. So I started running. I mean, not because I was necessarily a runner by nature, but it's the only thing that you bring your sneakers.
And you run every day?
No, I run today. I'm older. I run just 4 days a week, but I used to run 5 days a week. I mean,
and the days you don't run, you exercise or not?
No, I rest because I tend to get injured. So I wanted to run every day, but then you realize you couldn't because then you get injured, and when you get injured,
do you run early in the morning or at lunchtime, or usually when do you?
I prefer to run early in the morning or at lunchtime. Yeah. And
I always exercise early in the morning every day. I think it's very.
but you run, and I tend not to listen to music, and and it's amazing because when you're running or when you're doing something else, exercise, your mind start to go in one direction and your body start to go in another one. So sometimes
it's like, in a sense, it's like meditation, no? In a sense.
Sometimes you find solutions to problems that you have not been able to find while you're sitting at your office because you are not necessarily thinking about them in that specific moment in time. So it helps me a lot, and it also teaches a lot because it's there is always another hill. I mean, I run and you run uphill and then you go down, and there is always another hill.
And about books, José María, what type of books do you like to read?
I love history.
History?
I love history. I love history a lot. I read everything I can about history. Was that to be novels or essays or...
And why? Why do you think you like so much history? You take lessons for the present? You enjoy?
You tend to understand better life because others have lived something similar situations, and you understand better places when you read history. I understand much better Latin America when I was reading around Latin America.
And your most admired historic persons in the...
I have a great deal of admiration for Alexander the Great. I mean, Isabel la Católica, and for Napoleon. I mean, those three characters. And
why it's one of them? What would you say?
Because they have changed.
They have changed
everything. I mean, they changed everything. I mean, in the case of Alexander the Great, they changed. He enlarges the world. I mean, he went to places that were unthinkable. In the case of Isabel la Católica, she did the same. I mean, she not only was at the embryo of our country, of our Spain, but she was a massive startup funder. I mean, and in the case of Napoleon, because he took a situation which was the French Revolution, and he took it to another level. I mean, in him, I admire, in all of them, I admire that they were not just politicians in a big sense of the world, but they did a whole range of things. I mean, a civil code. I mean, they established.
No, of course, they have been extremely influential in history. And do you read business books or not that much?
Yes, I mean, but less so. I mean, a very specific one. I just, it's not a business book itself, but I just finished the last book from Henry Kissinger. It's called Leadership. Yeah. It was a mix of business and history. But yeah, from time to time, yeah. But I'm much more on history and then novels. I mean, that can teach you something. I mean, for me, a book needs to have it needs to teach you something. Yeah. It needs to have a purpose. And you need to have the ability, the skill of taking you somewhere else. Mm-hmm. I mean, being able to take you into a different place while you are reading it. I mean, so that's why for me, some novels, I mean, are also that skill, that quality. I mean, I was sharing with you. I mean, El Olvido que Seremos, Dr. Abad. I mean, these kind of books is also
very, very good book. Sometimes, well, at least in my case, I also enjoy, because every good book teaches you something, even if it's pure fiction. So it doesn't need to be close to reality, even if it's, because it teaches you something about human nature. It teaches you something about feelings. It teaches you something about sadness, about hope, about human relations. So every good book is, in fact, it was, I think, Harold Bloom, that's a very famous literary critic, that, the three writers that he admires the most are Dante, Cervantes, and Shakespeare. But talking about Cervantes and Shakespeare, he was saying that Cervantes showed people how to talk to each other, and Shakespeare showed us how to talk with yourself. No, so it's so when it's a good book, you are always learning something. Probably not facts, but you are learning something about the human nature. But I think we don't have much time, and before closing, I wanted to talk about two other subjects which I think are very relevant and could be related. One is, sometimes I receive the question about how can I become a better leader? No? Some people ask you this idea that leadership skills is something that you are born with them or you can train to become a better leader. And related with that, also, José María, I would like you, as far as we are here at IE University, what type of advice would you give to the IE students thinking about their lives, their professional lives, their personal lives? So these two elements I would like to cover before finishing this conversation.
Well, first, it's a serious responsibility. What I can, more than an advice, what I can share is what was useful for me. I mean, when I was at the university, I thought that you can plan your life, that somehow you can plan your life. And that and if you plan it right, you can somehow drive your destiny. And then very suddenly you realize that at the end, life is full of crossroads. I mean, situations that you have not been planning for, but they are there, and you need to take a decision. In my case, for example, again, getting back to my father was a public servant, a civil servant, and he wanted me to be a civil servant, and I decided not to do that. I mean, because I was not so attracted by that career, even though I admire him and I admire what he did. But I decided to go in another direction. But if you ask me, have you planned for what happened to you? Absolutely not. In every single crossroad, I need to take a decision. And your first job, where do you go? I mean, when you are already in a good place in one job and you're offered something else, and you have most of the times already some responsibility, some family responsibility, the only message I can share is that there is no journey, there is no roadmap, there is no handbook for that. The only thing you can do is enjoy, live your life. And I have been able to enjoy every single position. I was part of an audit firm, and as a junior, I liked my job, even though then I was in the stock market for a while, 7 years, and I enjoyed my job. Then I moved to a cement company, and then I have been 25 years now in Telefónica. Did I plan to go first to an audit firm, then to a broker house, and then to a cement company, and then to a No, I didn't.
Yeah, but you have always tried, to do your best at everything you were doing, and trying always to look for excellence in what you were doing. So you were not thinking in your journey or your next move, but you were putting 100% of you in what you were doing.
Getting back to the poem, I have always tried to give my best. When somebody offers me a job, they are offering me a job. So I should give back as much as I can to make sure that I honor that part of the contract. So making sure that...
But your concept, I know it, I'm certain about this, is your concept of giving your best is extremely demanding for you. Because when you say your best, it's really your best.
Yeah, because at the end, we all need to feel that we belong to something. So for me, when I was in the other firm, I belonged to that firm. And so giving my best is to commit. And then at the same time, the second verse is that, to be humble, or to be, to know, to remember who you are. To remember who your family was, what are your values, what are the kind of, my father showed me that hard work, commitment for him serving his country. So for me, it was those two things. So the only experience that I can share more than an advice is that when you are at a crossroad, always give your best. Remember who you are and where you are coming from, and the values that you are part of yourself, and then don't be afraid.
Well, thank you very much, José María. It has been an honor to share this first session with you. Thank you very much.